Okay, so last video we came to the freaky realization that dominant alleles are not the most common. It's not always the case. Dominants are not always most common because it's more it's freckles are dominant to no freckles, and most people you see don't have freckles. If you're the most common phenotype, we call you the wild type, and if not, we call you mutant. So while she's a pretty girl, so are all of them. Well, I'm sorry. So while she's a pretty girl up here, she has freckles. That's less common. So we apparently call them a mutant. It's a little crazy, but that's just what happens. So now we'll get into the new spot where, well, Mendel said all these things happen, but the reality is it's not always as simple as he made it, right? You don't have this many heritable characters are not just determined by only one gene. A lot of times there's multi-genes that play a role, and different genes play different roles, and they do different things. So it's not always as easy as it seems, as easy as he described, like we've said. So here's a picture of that. What Mendel said is, well, there's complete dominance. A dominant allele is completely dominant. It masks the effect of the recessive allele. If there's a purple/white heterozygous, we only see purple. Homozygous dominance and heterozygous have the same phenotype, but we do see some other things in the other things are seen genetically. There might be something called incomplete dominance. There's really not a dominant or recessive. The phenotype of the heterozygous is somewhere between the phenotypes of the two homozygotes. So if you have red, red, you're red. If you have white, white, you're white. If you have red and white, you're somewhere between them. You're a blend, you're pink. So we don't really use lower cases here. This probably shouldn't even be used like lowercase like this, but this is just the way we do it. Red and white would make pink in complete dominance. In complete dominance, this one right here, at complete dominance, red and white would make red. At incomplete dominance, red and white would make pink. So it's just a blend between them. Then there's something else called codominance, where both alleles are shown in their own distinguishable way, in their own separate way. So red and white don't make pink. Red and white make red and white, polka dots, or they're shown in some way. They're not a blend where it's just pink. It's reds here and whites here, so they're both shown in their own way. That's codominance. They're both co-expressed. So, in incomplete dominance, at incomplete dominance, red and white make pink. At codominance, red and white make red and white polka dots. So, there's a disease called hypercholesterolemia, a dangerously high amount of cholesterol in your blood. This is dangerous because it increases your risk for heart disease and heart attack. This disease has a genetic component as most do, and it displays incomplete dominance. If you remember, red and white make pink in incomplete dominance. There's a blend between the two homozygotes. So that means this. If you're homozygous dominant, you have normal cholesterol levels. If you're homozygous recessive, you have 5 times the normal levels. If you're heterozygous, you have somewhere in between. So you have about 2 times the normal level. If this was complete dominance, well then the heterozygous here would have the same phenotype as this. A heterozygous would have normal cholesterol levels, but that doesn't happen because it's incomplete dominance. The really sad part with this is that with homozygous recessive, individuals that are as young as 2 years old, they can have heart attacks. Grampy, 82-year-old Grampy, he gets heart attacks, right? 2-year-old babies should not be having heart attacks. 3-year-old babies should not be having heart attacks. That's something extremely serious because this severely increases your risk for heart disease and heart attack. Some of you have some sucky genetics, and as a result, you might have this or this, and now your blood cholesterol levels are high, and you're highly at risk for these conditions. So you have to severely watch what you eat to have good health. So here's a picture that if you're homozygous, Well, then you make normal amounts and you have normal amount of cholesterol in your blood. If you're heterozygous, you have a mild form, you have 2 times more cholesterol in your blood than you're supposed to. If you're homozygous recessive, well, then all of a sudden, now you have a severe form of this disease. You have 5 times the normal amount of cholesterol in your body. This is extremely dangerous, and like I said, very, very, very sadly, stuff like this can happen. A 2-year-old, happy 2-year-old birthday! But unfortunately, they died from a heart attack. Because at 2 years old, that can actually happen with this disease. So it's extremely crazy to think about, but it's true. This is a real life thing. This isn't something, they made up on, the National Geographic. This is a real life thing that really, unfortunately, plagues really young individuals because of some sucky genetics. So in cases like this, if you are heterozygous and your girlfriend is heterozygous, you have a 25% chance of making a child that has a severe disease. You have a 25% chance for this severe disease to plague your child, which increases their risk for this. So if you are heterozygous for this, I highly suggest you go to some kind of genetic therapy with your significant other to make decisions on how you can plan to try to decrease your risk of having a child as this, because you don't want to have a child that's 3 years old and that can have a heart attack and they can live the rest of their life with this increased risk. You have to be, cautious about that and understanding, and go to genetic counseling for that. Like we said, most alleles, or most genes, there are actually 2 or more alleles for. That's just kind of the case. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, and so forth. That just kind of happens. So a lot of times they have multiple alleles. Like blood type. Blood type has 4 different phenotypes. There are 4 different blood types when it comes to ABO at least. You could be type A blood, type B blood, type AB blood, or type O blood. It could be either one of those 4. And then there are positive and negatives, and that's used to describe something else. But there are 4 blood types, and I guess technically 8. A positive, A negative, B positive, B negative, and so forth. There are 4 major phenotypes. These are all based off alleles. There are 3 different alleles. IA, IB, and little I. And they code for carbohydrates, which go on the red blood cells, and they determine the blood type. So if an individual has this, IA, they will have an A carbohydrate on their red blood cell. They will have an A in their blood type. So if you have type A blood, you have at least one of these. If you have type AB blood, you have one of these. There's an allele of IB. If you have this allele, you have a type B in your blood. If you are type AB, you have this and this. If you are type B, you have this, and then maybe another one of that or something else. If you have this little I, then you're not going to deposit the carbohydrate on your membrane. So if you have 2 little i's, you're type O blood. If you have I capital A and a lowercase I, you're type A blood. If you have so all these different things are how you can get different blood types. If you're type A, you either are this or this. If you're type B, you're either this or this. If you're type AB, you're either this or this. If you're type O, you're definitely this. So that's how it works. There's 3 different alleles, but that can produce 4 different blood types. So look at this. What is this an example of? This type AB blood here. Is this an example of codominance or incomplete dominance? So this is an example of codominance. A and B are both co-expressed. If you have an IA and an IB allele, then you have type A blood. How do you know this isn't incomplete dominance? Well, incomplete dominance isn't red and white make red and white polka dot. It isn't A and B make both A and B. Incomplete dominance is red and white make pink, a blend. So it'd be A and B combined to make like C, or make something that's a blend between them. A.5.5B. Something weird like that, which doesn't exist. So blood typing is an example of codominance. Some traits aren't even as simple as just one gene determines this. Sometimes many different genes determine the phenotype and the way something looks. Like there's something called epistasis. Epistasis is when a gene at one location alters the phenotype of a gene, the phenotypic expression of a gene at a second spot. This sounds really confusing, so I'm going to say it again, and then I'll give you an example, and hopefully it makes sense. Epistasis is where one gene affects the way another gene is expressed. I'll give you an example. In Labrador retrievers and many other mammals like us, coat color depends on two genes. Hair color would be determined by two different genes. One determines which pigment is in the hair. Oh, capital B for black. Oh, lowercase b for brown. Oh, capital B for black, and then, lowercase b for blonde or something for us. But then there's another gene that says if you have this gene, then pigment will get deposited. If you don't have this gene, pigment is not deposited. So if you're capital E, pigment gets deposited. If you have a lowercase e, we don't deposit pigment, so there's no color. So I'll put this in a picture, and hopefully this makes sense. But if this doesn't make sense, and after the picture, you want to go back and rewind and replay this. You want to make sure you understand epistasis, where one gene determines the phenotypic expression of another gene. So here's this cute dog, and if you look at his genotype. He's capital B, capital B. He should have black hair. Well, am I colorblind? No. This dog is, a yellow Labrador. Why isn't it black? The gene says black. Oh, this one's supposed to be brown. Why isn't this one brown? Because look at this. He has a lowercase e. His genes might say, I have black hair, but he doesn't have an enzyme to deposit the black hair pigment. So as a result, he's a yellow lab. If there was a capital E here, then he'd be black. If there was a capital E here, then he'd be brown. But there's not. That's called epistasis. It doesn't matter what hair color or gene you have. Do you even have the gene to deposit the pigment anyways? Because if so, it doesn't matter if you have brown hair, or if your genes say brown hair. You're not even going to deposit any color to begin with. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'll show you one final picture. If you have two dogs that are heterozygous for these dogs are going to be yellow. Why? Because they have a homozygous recessive for E. Even though this one should be black and these should be brown, doesn't matter. They have a non-pigmentation because of this enzyme. All these here that are black and brown, they have a capital E, therefore they are having colored hair. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, you want to go back and rewind. Epistasis, that's extremely important. It's a little confusing, but this kind of makes sense. Sometimes there's something called polygenic inheritance, where different genes play a role and have an additive effect on a single phenotype. For example, skin color and height, right? So this is an example of polygenic inheritance, right? We're not all like Apple's old emojis, right? We're all not, pale is this, I forget what's the term for this, porcelain. We're not all porcelain like this, right? Good old Apple, thanks a lot. Luckily we have some nice, diverse emojis, but we're not like this. Why? Because there's polygenic inheritance. The more genes you have, the darker your skin's gonna be. So if you're like me, you are like this. But luckily, skin color doesn't work like that. Here's this pale girl and pale dude. They have like no dark skin alleles. But then he might have one dark skin allele, 2 dark skins, 3 dark skins, 4 dark skins, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you get the maximum, or close to the maximum number here. So this is just a spectrum. She has very few dark skin alleles. He has many over here. So skin color and height is an example of this. This is extremely important to understand. I'll show you a picture. Here's me. Whew. I got, 0 out of 0 dark skin alleles, right? Step outside and, you're like a reflection of the sun. But then, this person here has 1 dark skin allele. This person here is 2. I'm sorry, this person here is 1. This person here is 2. This person here is 3. This person here is 4. And then this lucky person here is 5. And this awesome person here is 6. So this actually can happen. So if you were a medium skin individual like this, you actually could have a child that has this super dark skin. It's possible. Because of the way genetics work, you both could give a dark skin allele. Now, if you're like me, I could only have a porcelain baby if I, mate with another porcelain woman, right? That's the only thing that's possible. But if I was mated with an individual who was at all of the alleles, we could make, a dark-skinned baby, although it'd be very unlikely because of genetics-wise. These two individuals, if they had 64 babies, only one of them would look like this. Only one of them would look like this. And if we look, most of them would be, this number 3, probably like right around here. That's the way most of them would look. Just like them. So here's luckily, how skin color works. Here I am here. It's a better picture of me. A ghost, right? And then this person here is just, one extra dark skin allele. This one has another one. This one person has 1 more. This person here is 1 more. And this guy here has about, 1 more and 1 more here. And then finally you get to here, and then you get to here, and then you get to the darkest here and here. They just have more dark skin alleles. That's how skin color works. That's also how height works. You could have, the more of these tall alleles you have, the taller you are. The less you have, the shorter you are. That's why it's not as simple as tall and short. There's a spectrum, because the more you have, the taller you are. So here, I'm probably right around here, right? And that means if I mate with another tall person, I'm more likely to have, taller individuals. And it's, almost impossible to have this. So this is why you see cases like this. Whoa, right? Whoa, he's over here. And then you got her, she's probably, I can't even tell if she's just normal height or just, shorter, but she's probably, here to here, somewhere within this range, right? So this is just a really good example of the differences you can see in height range. And it's all based off genetics. So if they have an individual, they're probably going to be somewhere in here, right, in this spectrum, because she doesn't have any high, tall skin allele, or not tall skin, tall alleles to give. But he has plenty. But how's that going to happen? Sometimes genetics isn't as simple as just genes. Sometimes genetics, the phenotype, the way you physically look, can also depend on the environment. So genes always aren't the major role that affects the way you look or that affects your phenotype. There could be something called a multifactorial. There's lots of different factors which make their way into this traits. So multiple genes play a role along with environmental influences. Multifactorial traits. The environment affects the phenotype. Here's a picture of that. You could be like me and be just like these shorts, right? But I'm a little darker than that, even though I'm naturally like that, right? Because I go outside and I have a 45-minute drive to Dade City, and that sun will, go in my skin, and it'll, increase the intensity and the pigmentation of my skin. So somebody might have darker skin than their genetics actually have because they sit out there in the sun. Now, quick warning, you look good like this, right? With your shirt off, in your bikini, right? You look good. The thing is, though, if you're like me and if you have pale skin, and even if you don't have pale skin, you got to be careful, because that sunlight, that UV radiation, can actually increase your risk for skin cancer, especially if you're a ghost like me. So you have to be careful. Always apply sunblock. You can still get tan with a sunblock. You just don't get as much cancer, right? So wear sunblock. So these people, they might be pale like me, but they go out in the sun and gosh, they look good, right? Out in the sun, getting nice tan, getting nice, tan skin. Here's a woman. Look at this kid's face. She spent a little bit too much time out in the sun, and she affected her phenotype. She doesn't have a phenotype for wrinkly skin, but the sun dried it out and made her. She's a nice caramel color skin. This is a little too much though, right? The environment. She spent too much time in the sun, so that's what happened. Other things play a role in multifactorial traits, right? Like homosexuality. The environment also plays a role with this. It's not just genes do play a role. Genetics does play a role in your sexual preference and behavior. It does. That's, facts. There are identical twins and who are, they have a very high, it's like a 50-50 chance if one of the child is homosexual, then the other one is likely to be 50% chance. That isn't seen unless their, genetics plays a role. So genetics plays a role, but so does the environment, right? The environment plays a role, whether certain parents are there, certain things are happening, certain life events, what TV show was the main thing on? Was it Teletubbies or, was it Power Rangers? It's a little facetious, but an example like that, what are the things that impacted your life and they played different roles? Or the people in your life and how did they act in certain ways and they did certain things and what plays a role in that? So genetics and the environment, they both play a role. This is important. Genetics does play a role. So don't think, any other way. Genetics absolutely plays a role in this, and that's scientifically proven. So if you thought something else before, you can erase that from your mind because now you know the truth. Genetics does play a role, but so does the environment. It's a multifactorial trait. Multiple genes are combining, and the environment is combining to produce a phenotype of having a preference for someone of the same sex. So these people here, if they don't make you smile, they don't make you happy, I don't know. But I like this slide a lot because this kind of puts a lot of things into perspective. And that's extremely important to understand. Not only that, here's something a little more tangible. You could have a flower, and if it's in a basic soil, a pH above 7, it looks pink. If it's in acidic soil, a pH below 7, it turns blue. The environment plays a role. They might have a genotype that says, oh, I'm supposed to have, purple, or I'm supposed to have, this color. But when it's in a base, it turns pink. When it's in acid, it turns blue. It's kind of interesting to think about. The environment does play a role, just like the environment plays a role here. Just like you might have good genetics where you're really, really smart, but somebody who doesn't have good genetics and their genetics say you're dumb, they can study and then still do just as good as a smart person on the exam. The environment plays a role. What you do, your life isn't predetermined. Work hard, and hopefully you can succeed. So just as a review, genotype is the genetic makeup. Phenotype is the physical makeup, the physical appearance. That includes the way you look. That includes the stuff going on inside. Do you have, 3 kidneys? Do you have half of a liver? Are you missing something on the inside? That's your phenotype, the way you physically look. Your physiology. Oh, are you a super sweaty boy? Huh. That's all based off phenotype. Or your behavior. Are you quirky? Are you this? It's all based off your genotype determines that. So quirkiness and these different things, these are phenotypes, these expressions. And don't forget, now that we know, the phenotype, the way you act and look, is not always just the genotype. It's based off the genotype and the environment. They play a different role in that. Like many different diseases like heart disease and diabetes and alcoholism, you could be more at risk to have that because of genetics. But the environment can play a role too. If dad's always drinking, then you might be more likely to do that. If you live somewhere where tequila is, cheaper than water, like when I went to France, it was cheaper to buy a bottle of wine than it was a bottle of water. So of course I'm gonna drink wine. Why even drink water, right? I'm gonna, I stocked up on wine, So in cases like that, they're just, they want me to embrace my alcoholic side, right? Or cheeseburgers. When cheeseburgers are 49 cents at McDonald's it's hard not to get heart disease. I don't blame the, half America that has heart disease, because cheeseburgers at McDonald's are 49 cents and they taste great. But then it cost me $6 to go buy a salad. Yeah, right? So this is just different environment. It also plays a role. But luckily, like I said, doesn't matter what your genotype it is your lifestyle, the environment has an important effect on your phenotype. So don't forget that. You might have that risk for breast cancer, but that's okay. You can make some environmental changes. Don't smoke. Keep a good healthy weight. Consume fiber, and you can decrease your risk for that. That's why if you smoke, like I said so many times, that's the end for you, right? Smoking is so bad for you, and what smoking does to your body. Increases your risk for all these different types of cancer. It changes the DNA in your body, increases your risk for cancer, changes the DNA in your child, and can lead to some malformations in children. It just rots you from the inside out. Smoking is such a bad idea. You definitely don't want to smoke. So please, if you do, think about it. There's lots of free treatments which you can get. You want to take advantage of the treatments that are available, because it'll save you in the long run, because you're doing some pretty horrible things to your body when you smoke, because there's so much carcinogens, so many disease-causing agents in there that can cause some really terrible conditions. Increases your heart rate, your risk for heart disease and obesity and hypertension and cancer of all types. Please just reconsider. So the thing is, we got to all these things. We talked about all these awesome things. Mendel used pea plants because they are better to use. They're good subjects for genetic research. Humans are not, right? We live too long, and that's a good thing. The average human lives 79 years. Imagine if Mendel wanted to do the pea plant experiment, but with humans. He'd have to wait for, grandparents to have kids, and then those mom and dads to have kids. He'd be dead by the time that happened, right? He can't do that. We don't do experiments with humans, really, because we live too long. Not only that, we don't make a lot of babies, right? The average U.S. woman has 1.9 children. That means for every 100 women, they have about 190 children. So it's kind of interesting to think about. We're not like plants where we pop out, thousands of children. We only make 1.9. Not only that, we can't do breeding experiments, right? That's just completely unacceptable. We can't say, hey, good-looking dude, I'd be interested in seeing what happens if you go have sex with her. I want to see what kind of babies you make, right? We can't do that. Or we can't say, oh, hey, asthmatic boy, I've always wondered if asthma had a genetic component. Go have sex with this girl, or I'm going to, link you, or I'm going to have you, give you a staged wedding where I want you to have, you're going to marry this girl, and I want to see if you pass on asthma. Let's find out. I mean, we all want to know, right? We can't do that. That's just a horrible thing. So we can do that with pea plants, though. We can cut off pieces and put it in other pieces. Or we can do that with one of our favorite things to work with, fruit flies. Nobody cares if we say, hey, fruit fly, go have sex with this fruit fly. Nobody cares about that. We'll just do a bunch of different things. So in genetics, we do lots of experiments with fruit flies, and we'll kind of talk about how that played a role. But in my genetics class at USF, we did experiments with fruit flies, and it looked just like this. And we watched different things, and we saw how different flies passed on, certain wing types and color and red eyes and white eyes and so forth. So while it's not ethical to do breeding experiments, that's just a crappy thing to do, right? But regardless, these genetics of what we get from fruit flies and pea plants, we can actually use that to pass it on to get some really important human information. So I think this is a really good point to stop, and then we will pick up here on the next parts. This is the end of part 2. We completed part 1. Now we just completed part 2 when we just ended with pedigrees. So that's it, and I'll see you on the next video.